Emma Olivier is the founder of the 20%, and to tell us what that is and why it's important that we know, welcome to Broad.
Thanks, Trace. Nice to be here.
Good to have your company. Hey, tell us about the 20% and the whole kind of focus and the why behind it.
I was born without a left forearm, so I've had a disability all my life. I've worked in the corporate environment for nearly 30 years, and I didn't see myself in the people that I worked with, in the customers that I was serving. I worked in a big consulting company, and I wanted to go out and make a difference. And I thought, well, 20% of us have a disability in Australia. Where are we? And why aren't organisations thinking about access and inclusion in a different way? So I left my big job a couple of years ago and decided to jump off a cliff and create my own business.
Not literally.
Not literally.
Metaphorically.
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 And here we are 2 years later, and the conversations, I love having conversations around disability inclusion in unusual places. Because if we are a fifth of the population, where are we? When I look at our parliament, where are we? When I look in our media, we're starting to be there, but we need to be more there. And when I particularly look in our leadership of our big companies, we're not there. So I decided to use my skills and to start to provocate and have those conversations, and it's been great. The appetite's definitely there and the conversations are starting to be had, but there's obviously much more that we need to do. Storytelling is probably the biggest lever that we can use, and we need more people to tell their stories of disability. Because we don't want other people telling our stories. We need to tell them, and we particularly need senior leaders to tell them, because you can't be what you can't see. And there's a stat that of the ASX 300, there's not one board director that has identified with having a disability. And when you think of the power that that group of organisations has in Australia, that's shocking. I know there would be people with disability in that group, but for whatever reason they haven't shared their stories, and we need to really give people courage to be vulnerable. And it's amazing when people start to share their stories with their workmates and colleagues.
Emma Olivier is with us. She's the founder of the 20%, the Disability Inclusion Advisory. And we're speaking today, Emma, ahead of National Disability Day, which is next week. And I'm also very mindful that in fact became the catalyst for this conversation, when in fact it is a conversation. It's a bit like the Women's Day conversation.
Yep.
You know, it is a conversation that we do need to have all the time, not just those moments where those issues are amplified. When was the moment for you that you felt, I'm going to lean into my disability with your good arm, but I'm going to lean in and really actually own this and not try and mask it, because I know a lot of people who do live with disability are expert maskers. When did you shift?
Look, I feel quite lucky that you could see that I have one hand. It's not something that I can hide. Despite the fact it's quite visible, in my career it was never spoken about, probably for the first 2/3 of my career. And it shifted towards the end of my corporate career when I became the executive sponsor of disability inclusion in Australia and New Zealand. And people used to come up to me and share their stories. And I began to realise that there was this whole cohort of people that weren't being represented, that weren't being thought of. And I think for me, I realised that I felt quite privileged to be a senior leader, and I felt like I had a responsibility to start talking about it because it wasn't being done. And I also thought, I don't want to wait for someone else to do it. I'm 54 this year, 54 this year. I need to get in there and help aggravating myself because the dial is turning really, really slowly. And when we think of access and inclusion, it's more than a ramp. We need to think of things like we all use Siri on our phones. We've all used closed captions looking at a video. We've all appreciated descriptions of images on social media. Those concepts of universal design actually help us all.
You talk about disability as a superpower.
Yeah.
How does that manifest for you day to day?
It gives me resilience. I'm a creative problem solver, and I challenge any of your listeners to try to do up their shoes with one hand. It's particularly challenging. And I think it puts me into places that I wouldn't have been had I not had two hands.
Tell us about the young Emma.
Yep.
Tell us about, because that's an image that I think we all have as young people when we first work out how to tie our shoelaces. So take us to young Emma and you navigating that space with one hand.
Until I ended high school, so I was born in 1970, until I ended high school, I wore an artificial arm. And when I went to university, I decided to stop wearing it because it felt more normal for me not to wear it. I used to just have to ask for help, and I still have to ask for help. And I think we make this assumption that it's easier to ask for help. It's actually really, really difficult. So I don't know what it's like to have two hands. I can't imagine it. So you just work with the gifts that you've been given. And I come from a family that treated me exactly the same. I was given the same opportunities as everyone else, but I wasn't able to play netball in the 70s. There was things that happened like that people made assumptions about what I could do and what I couldn't do. And it was quite liberating going to university and I feel quite comfortable not wearing an artificial arm. I felt like I could do most things without it. And I think asking them if they want help is absolutely the right thing to do. But we shouldn't let fear paralyse us into inertia. And the fear of saying, progress over perfection. We should strive for progress, and we're all going to make mistakes, and that's okay.
Live big, live broad.
Broad Radio.
Download the Broad Radio app now to listen.